Happy Easter, and because it's Easter, we're making hot cross buns. I am making next level expert hot cross buns. Now, I think nothing beats the smell of hot cross buns baking in the kitchen to really trigger those Easter memories and those Easter feelings. Here I am making the easiest, or our easiest recipe for hot cross buns. This is the beginner's recipe. This is the one you bake with kids. This is the one you bake when you haven't got much time. It really couldn't be any easier. It's a no-knead recipe where you simply mix all the ingredients together, you form them into your buns and you bake them, and that's it. So we have our strong white bread flour. Now, because this is a yeast-based dough, we are using strong white bread flour. If you only have plain, then that's fine as well, but as a preference, we want to be using strong white bread flour. Then we have our mixed spice. So our mixed spice goes in with our flour. Then we have some sugar, just to sweeten everything up. And then we have a decent pinch, about 5 grams of salt. So that goes in as well. And mix with the spoon just to get the spice all mixed through. So next I'm going to rub in my butter. So just like making a crumble topping or making pastry, we've got cold cubed butter, and that's going to go into the flour. Then we're just going to use our fingertips to rub the butter in with the flour, and we just want the two to come together to make a crumbly mixture. So we're looking for the same texture as a crumble topping. So rubbing the butter into the flour is a lovely job that kids could do. See, this recipe is full of great little jobs that little hands would really love. So this, in my idea, is a great hot cross bun recipe for beginner bakers. So next I'm going to add my dried fruit. We've just got a mixture of dried fruit. You can use any dried fruit you want. You can use raisins, or raisins and sultanas, or just sultanas for just raisins. And then we're going to add our yeast. So this is a sachet of yeast, which is 7 grams. It's fast action yeast, which means you don't have to dissolve it in a liquid before you add it. You can add it straight to your dry ingredients. For any bread, if you're making a very basic bread, then it's always 7 grams of yeast to 500 grams of flour. So in with the yeast, give that a bit of a mix. And when we're happy that that's all mixed nicely together, we're going to add our wet ingredients. So our wet ingredients are nothing more than some milk and some eggs. I'm going to crack 2 eggs into the milk, which is warm, and mix the two together. Then you can just pour in your wet ingredients. And if you had a stand mixer, you could do this with a stand mixer. I mean, you could get your hands in there. If you're doing this with little ones, they get their hands really nice and sticky. Make sure their hands are clean. But another nice way of doing this is just to cut it through with a knife. The knife sort of acts as the blade to a stand mixer. We're just trying to hydrate all that flour. So when your dough has come together and there's no dry bits left in the bowl, so you've got this beautiful, enriched, spiced, yeasted dough, we're just going to leave that to relax for 5 minutes before we shape our hot cross buns. So our dough's had 5 minutes resting. We need to cut it into 8. Now we could use a pair of scales and divide the dough into 8, or you can do it like this, which is also a very easy way of doing it. So a little bit of flour on the surface, like so. Then you want your dough into an even log, and then to get it into 8, we go half, and each one goes in half again, and then each half goes in half, and that should give you 8 pieces, roughly the same size. Now this is how we're going to shape our hot cross buns. You take a piece of dough, and then with your hand, like a claw, you're going to roll it on the surface, and you want to get a bit of tension from the surface. You don't want the surface to be too floured, and work it round, and that should give you, boom, a perfect little hot cross bun. We're going to do these in 2 rows of 4. You want to leave a bit of a gap in between them. They're going to grow by about 1/3. So here we have our 8 buns, all rolled, all beautiful, all tight. Now you want to leave them at room temperature for about 45 minutes to an hour or somewhere quite warm, and they will have hopefully grown by about half again in 45 minutes to an hour. The rule with this is the warmer the place you leave them, the quicker they are going to grow. The colder the place you leave them, the slower they're going to grow. Our hot cross buns have proved for an hour. They've come up by about a third or about half again, which is really nice. So imagine in the oven, they're going to puff up even more and they're going to touch. That's just how we want them. So now we need to make the cross. So without a cross, you have perfectly good, really delicious fruited buns. Some people might call them Chelsea buns or just fruited buns. There isn't an exact science to making the cross to a hot cross bun because flour differs. The different age of your flour, the different types of flour you use is going to dictate how much water is needed. So you're looking for a sticky paste that you can just pipe over neatly, that's not going to run everywhere. So I'm going to start off by adding the flour into our bowl, then we're going to add our water gradually. So I'm going to start off by adding maybe a tablespoon of water, and that I can see isn't wet enough. So now we're going to add it gradually. There we have a sticky dough. I'm going to use a recyclable plastic bag. You could just use a sandwich bag. And I just want a very thin piece off the end. And then we're just going to go with our crosses. So going in one direction, over, like so, nice and neat. And then we make the cross by just going in the other direction. So there we have our crossed hot cross buns. They're going to go in the oven for about 12 to 15 minutes until they're puffed up, golden and ready to glaze. So there are our basic buns baked. Now the debate whether or not to glaze a hot cross bun. So because these are our easy buns, we're doing nothing more than brushing them with a little bit of honey as our glaze, and that's going to make them come up all lovely and sticky. With a bit of supervision and a bit of eye on what they're doing, these buns are perfect for baking with children over Easter. It's a real beginner's hot cross bun. So these are our easy Easter bake with kids hot cross buns. So first off, we have our flour in our stand mixer. My mixture of raisins and sultanas, they're going in, and then just to add like a lovely extra level of fruitiness, and also because they're a little bit sour, I like to add dried cranberries, so they go in as well. Our mixed spice, and then to add a delicious sort of floral background flavour, I'm adding cardamom. So cardamom goes in as well as our mixed spice. Our 7 grams of fast action yeast, so that's a sachet of yeast, in that goes. And then we're going to add the zest of an unwaxed orange. Just going to grate the zest straight in to give it some really lovely background orange flavour. So in that goes. Then we have our sugar, because this is a sweet and rich dough. Mix everything together on a low speed, and while that's mixing together, I'm going to mix my wet ingredients. I'm going with a little bit of milk and a lot of eggs. Eggs add richness and they add liquid, so the yolk of an egg adds richness to a dough, and the white of an egg is basically water, it's liquid, so it adds the liquid element, and we're going with a little bit of milk. So I'm going to mix the two together in a jug, and then we're going to use 4 eggs, where recipes normally use 2. Give that a whisk. We're going to add our wet ingredients, so add those gradually. The whole reason we're using a stand mixer is because we're working with quite a wet dough that's really enriched. When it comes to adding the flour, the whole process is a lot easier to do with a stand mixer. We're trying to hydrate all the flour, so when you've got a dough that's come together as one, just like making brioche or making an enriched dough, we are going to add a lot of butter to this. Now you want to do this gradually, 1 or 2 pieces at a time. When the butter's incorporated, you're going to add a bit more. Now this does take a bit of time, but by adding it gradually, the butter's going to be absorbed into that dough without it splitting, without the butter melting. This is just the same process as making an enriched dough like a brioche, which is going to give us beautiful, really buttery, soft hot cross buns. This is exactly what we're after. So there's our dough, our lovely enriched, sticky, buttery, brioche hot cross bun dough. Now for the best flavour, because I think anything that's sort of yeast-based and flour-based, you get so much more flavour if you leave them to prove overnight in the fridge. That isn't essential. If you were to leave this at room temperature, it'd double in size in about 3 to 4 hours. So you could do it like that, but for the best flavour, to make them super next level, we're going to leave this to prove overnight in the fridge. So here's the dough that we made yesterday. It's had 24 hours in the fridge. It's actually a lot easier to work with once it's cold because it's got all that butter in. So even if you weren't proving it overnight, you're proving it at room temperature, I would suggest putting it in the fridge for about half an hour before you work with it, just because it's easier to work with. But what we're going to do now is we're going to shape it into 12 buns. Because these are next level and I want it to be absolutely perfect, I'm going to weigh our dough and I'm going to divide it into 12 so each one will be exactly the same size. So now we've got our 12 buns, which are 90 grams exactly each. It's just a matter of rolling them. To get the nice tightness on our little buns, the easiest way to do this is to get your hand, claw it over, and then just grip tighter as you do, like so. That's the first way. There you have a lovely round tight little bun, or you can use two hands, a bit like a potter's wheel, and you can use both the side of both your hands, probably a bit easier than using one hand. And we're going to line them up on a tray 3 by 4. Now because these are cold, these need to prove for about 2 hours, but you really want them to double in size. Because this is an enriched dough, it's really important that these are really puffed up before you put them in the oven. You want them to be big and puffy, practically doubled in size, and that's going to ensure that they're really light and fluffy in the middle once they're baked. Our next level buns have had about 2 hours proving. They've puffed up beautifully. This is exactly how you want them. They've basically doubled in size. This is really important. Without the crosses, you have gorgeous, brioche, packed with fruit, lovely fruit buns. But it being Easter, we're going to cross these. And it being a next level, we're going to make more than just a water and flour paste. We are going to start with flour, but then we're going to sweeten that with sugar. And because we've got cardamom running through the buns, we're also going to add a pinch of cardamom to our cross mixture. If you happen to be a sourdough baker, like I am, I swear by this. The best crosses I've ever made on hot cross buns have been used with sourdough discard. So if you do have some sourdough discard because you are a sourdough baker, then the best crosses I've ever made has been made with using sourdough discard. I think it's the perfect texture and it's the perfect stickiness, and it adds just a lovely little sour tang to the crosses. But we don't have those, so we have our flour, our sugar and our cardamom mixture. So to that we're going to add water gradually. We'll start off with about 2 tablespoons. There we have, see this, it just moves off the spoon. It spreads ever so slightly. That's the perfect consistency. Using a recyclable piping bag. And now we're just going to do our crosses. So there we have our next level buns crossed to make them next level hot cross buns. They're going to go in the oven for about 15 minutes until they've puffed up and they're ready to glaze. Oh, look at those. So our next level hot cross buns, I mean, you can see they're all yellow from all that butter that we put in them. Glazing them gives them that trademark beautiful shine. Now if you do glaze them, just remember that putting them in the toaster is going to be a little bit trickier because that glaze can burn quite easily. And if I do toast them, I'm just going to split them in half and put them under a grill rather than putting them in the toaster. So I'm going to glaze them. So for these, we're glazing them with some warm apricot jam, and that just goes over the top like so, And that's going to add a lovely fruity flavour that's going to work with all those gorgeous spices. We've got the cardamom, the mixed spice. The flavour of that dough is just going to be amazing because we've cold proofed it overnight, so it's going to have maximum flavour. They're beautifully light because we've let them double up on the second proof, and they're full of butter. They've got more of a sort of brioche type texture than a bready bun. And because they're still roasting hot from the oven, I'm just going to leave them to rest for about 30 minutes and then they're ready to enjoy. So these are our next level hot cross buns. You can find the recipes on goodfood.com or download our app, and don't forget to comment below.